Hi, my name is Hunter and I'm in 11th grade.
I'm Lila Roberts and I am a senior.
I'm Julie Jacqueline in 11th grade.
I think that AP Lit is really helping me prepare because it's allowing me to read college level literature and be able to comprehend that literature at a high level.
I love the community in my classes. We all bond over academic rigor, and I think it's really nice to be in a community where everybody really values intelligence and values helping each other and asking difficult questions.
They're fun and challenging when you sort of like get the concepts and apply them in the correct way. That feeling of just success when you solve a problem, that's absolutely amazing.
I really like all the discussions that we have in classes. I think that everybody always has something really interesting to say and everybody can always bring something to the discussion.
I think that one thing I've really learned through my AP classes is how to manage my time and how to prioritize. And I think I've also learned how to quickly and effectively solve a problem using different strategies. Like if something isn't working, I think I've learned how to quickly turn to other solutions.
Okay, so without further ado, we are going to first start off with the group that handled the legislative process poster is going to present to us today and share a little bit about the legislative process with us. And then after they have gone, we are going to spend the rest of this class period kind of pushing the bills that you've written through the legislative process.
I can go ahead and start. So this section is on how the bill is written and proposed. And so either the Senate or the House of Representatives can propose a bill and write a bill. And then in the House, you put the proposed bill into the hopper, which is a wooden box that's at the front of the room. And then how the bill is labeled in the House of Representatives, it starts with HR, as you can see on the screen, and then it's followed by the number that indicates the order in which it was proposed. And so an example is HR 207. And then in the Senate, the senators can introduce the bill in a speech in front of their colleagues, which is way less formal. And then the title of it starts with the S, capital S, and then follows with the number. And then a lead committee is the primary committee considering the bill. And usually in the House, there's only one committee who reviews the bill. And sometimes there are more committees if it falls under a particular committee's jurisdiction. And in the Senate, the bill is usually only referred to one committee.
If Congress is not currently in session, so if they pass the bill like very last minute, and the president ignores it for 10 days, it's called a pocket veto. Nothing happens. The bill just kind of the president puts it in his or her metaphorical pocket, and it's just kind of gone. And that's it for the legislative process. Fun fact, which I'm pretty sure was in the book, and I might have the details wrong, but fun fact is because we were talking about filibusters earlier. The longest filibuster went for an absurd amount of time, over a day, I think. Might be wrong. And Ted Cruz once filibustered by reading Green Eggs and Ham out loud. That's all for our presentation, I believe.
All right, thank you guys very much. So I want to, first of all, just pay you a compliment. Your poster's layout design is truly fantastic. It is very well set, like very detailed, but also still visual and immediately apparent how the information flows through that poster. So I just wanted to give you guys credit for an excellent design on that one, and also really in-depth content. Thank you for all of that. There's a few things that I want to review really quickly before you all dive into the next stage of your project. And so I am going to bring up a whiteboard and write some notes down on the screen. The first one is a pet peeve of mine that I hear over and over again from students all year long. I understand that it's easy to confuse these words, but we need to know these words and use them correctly. So there are 3 words that are going to pop up over and over again in the textbook, in particular in chapter 12. And those 3 words are legislation, legislature, and legislator. Every year we do a mini lesson on these three words just to make sure that everybody knows the differences in meaning between them, because they're so similar to one another that we confuse them in common speech all the time. Like we say one when we mean to say the other, and that's fine. Accidents are accidents, and we use the wrong words sometimes, but I want to make sure everybody knows the differences between these words. So does anybody out there think that they can tell us what the difference between legislation, legislature, and legislator are? Tiago.
I believe that legislation are bills or other laws passed by the legislative branch, so Congress. Legislature is the branch itself, so the House and Senate, and legislators are Congress people.
That's correct, yes. So when you're using these words, legislation is the stuff that a legislature creates, and legislators are members of the legislature. If that's not confusing enough. So these are people, this is a group of people, this is stuff. Just so that everybody's clear on those three definitions really quickly. Questions before I move on to, so I want to review a couple points of the poster that I think were covered really nicely, and just kind of create a streamlined outline of it here. In the House, you have the House Rules Committee that determines how long debate will last and what the rules of debate will be, and so on and so forth. So eventually you're gonna get to a vote in the House. But in the Senate, you have unanimous consent, which basically just means that all of the senators get together and decide what the rules of debate are gonna be for each bill. And if it's not unanimous, it's not binding. And that is where the filibuster comes from. Because in a filibuster, that is essentially a senator or a small group of senators who are refusing to go along with unanimous consent, who are refusing to consent. And so instead of agreeing to the debate rules, they just debate endlessly and can technically debate forever until the heat death of the universe, right? If they wanted to, or until a vote of cloture is made. And in the Senate, this is evolved over time, but right now, cloture requires 60 votes, and that is to end a filibuster and vote on a bill. But once the filibuster has been ended, once debate is ended, it still only takes a majority in the Senate to pass the bill. The problem with that is that because of this cloture rule, in reality, it ends up basically meaning that you need 60 or more votes to pass a bill, because effectively everything else is just going to get shut down by a filibuster. After the debate and vote, it goes to conference committee if it passes. So if it passes the House and it passes the Senate, it goes to a joint committee, conference committee. Oops. Joint committee, actually, I'm not even going to use that language. Let me correct that language, sorry. We'll call it a bicameral committee, meaning it has members of both the House and the Senate. And they work out the differences, because remember that during debate and vote, they can, I should have said, they can also amend. During the debating and voting stage in both chambers, they can amend the bill itself and then pass it in whatever version they agree on. So when it goes to conference committee, it's possible that the House has passed a different version of the bill than the Senate. So the conference committee works out the difference. Then it goes back to the chambers. We'll call it revote. And send to the President of the United States. Any other questions? Cassidy.
Does the entire Senate have to meet when they're debating a bill?
Do they have to what?
Does the entire Senate have to meet when debating a bill, thereby making the 60 votes? No?
No, if a senator doesn't show up, a senator doesn't show up. So bills can be voted in with a majority of the voting members present. In other words, like if there's a day where 10 of the senators are out sick because of a pandemic or something like that, and something goes to vote that day, you don't need as many votes. Yeah, that's why people tend to pay a lot of attention to like the attendance of senators when they're looking when election time comes around, because there are some senators or House members who are sort of notorious for missing days, for being out on days of votes. And when they miss those voting days, it actually becomes easier for the opposing party to pass. Yeah. Good question. Now it's time for them, and we're going to pretend like you've proposed them, like you've presented them to Congress. So if you're in the House, you've either put them in the hopper, or if you're in the Senate, you've announced your bill to your colleagues, and it's time for your bills to go to committee. So today, you are going to spend the remainder of this period very quickly. It's a rush job. That's the way it goes. You're going to be spending this period discussing the bill in your committee and suggesting changes to the bill. Yes, Lola.
Are we suggesting changes based on like our position, like who we're supposed to be, or are we making changes just based on our own personal preferences?
No, you're making these changes based on who you represent and what party you are a member of. Okay, your rooms are open and you may go ahead and jump in and start discussing your bills and making suggestions. This is an opportunity for you to start reviewing for the AP exam. Please take advantage of it. Okay, thanks folks. Have a great day and I'll see you all on Thursday.
Hi, I'm Michelle and I'm in 12th grade.
Hi, I'm Valeria Guti and I'm a 12th grader.
I think they're helping me prep for college because there's definitely a lot of like advanced material and the teachers really help us understand it better. So like you get a really good understanding and not just like teaching for a test.
I like that there's always like space for discussions and kind of like having a conversation with people that, you know, are gonna like be super passionate about the topic.
I think they challenge me because they always question you and like help you think and dig deeper into the problems. And so like you're not just like going on the surface of the material, but you're actually going deep.
I feel like the challenge and just like the like constant motivation that's just like there. That's probably like one of the most like interesting aspects about learning Kirby.
I think I like just like the whole atmosphere. It's like always like a really nice, just like kind place, and people always like super collaborative.
As you can see, the main goal for today is to just get a discussion of the story this morning, this evening, so soon under our belts. And it's such a complex story that I honestly, we could talk about this story for a week, but there are a few highlights that I'd like to address with you all. And the fact that he's a singer, the narrator is a singer, was interesting. And there's this one scene where he actually mentions the titles of some songs that he thinks about or sings. So I thought it might be nice to look at some lyrics and hear some of those songs. So that's part of what we'll do today. For next time, there's another story by James Baldwin called Previous Condition. It's much shorter than the one for today. So it's going to feel like, so it's going to feel very light compared to today, although the subject matter is not light. And then the other thing to do for Thursday is to please study the Morrison vocabulary words, because there will be a vocab quiz on Thursday. The story by James Baldwin that you read for today is so complex that I think that we need to summarize it. And one of the things I realized while I was rereading it over the weekend was the whole thing takes place in, I'm guessing, 13 or 14 hours, believe it or not. It starts out with these people getting ready to go out for the evening, and then it ends the very next morning when the narrator comes back and gets his kid from Madame Dumont's apartment. But in the process of it, there are all these flashbacks that take him back years. So I think we need to try to summarize what happens in the story and what the flashbacks are all about. And I wonder if I could get a volunteer to dive in and get us started. We could do a tag team summary, and we could popcorn summary it. Who can get us started? Like, what's going on right at the beginning? Anna, go ahead and get us started.
Well, in the beginning, we learn, oh my gosh, I'm like completely forgetting his name now. The main character.
The narrator doesn't have a name. So you're right not to remember.
I don't. Okay. Well, the narrator, we learned that his wife and sister, first of all, his sister is visiting him from Alabama. His wife is described as, like, I think, a progressive Swede, and they live in Paris. And so then his sister and his wife are going out for the night. And we learned that the narrator is also going out with this guy who we learn later is the director of this movie that he's been in. And then this movie is like his cause to fame, and like he gets famous from this movie. And so, but anyways, and then it kind of goes into sort of like a flashback, and we learn that the narrator and his family, he has a son, are all moving to America and moving back to America in the narrator's case because he was born there.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Super useful. Who can take over now? What's go ahead, Michelle.
I think this is around like where it starts cutting to like the flashbacks. And at first I didn't really understand they were flashbacks, but then after a certain while I got it. And he was talking about his relationship with his wife and how like they always protected their son, but the way they did it was like not by shielding him from the world, but rather like supporting him and like lifting him up, which I thought was like really just like beautiful the way he wrote it. And yes, they talk about his son for a while, and then sort of like a glimpse into his backstory. Like he says that like him and his sister Louisa like share like a glance that not even Harriet knows.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. So we get a sense of like family life back in Alabama was troubled in some way, whether it was because of Alabama or something else going on. Okay, that's good. So what else is happening in the story? There's some flashbacks too. Can anybody remember what some of the flashbacks are about? Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Well, the first flashback from New York, he's like remembering being a elevator operator and like having to speak a certain way to the white people while he was doing that to not make them angry.
Yeah. Do you know where that is? Do you happen to, or are you just, it's okay if you don't know what the page number is, but if you know where it is, I think that's a fascinating passage.
I don't know the page number exactly.
It's okay. If you find it, tell us later. It's totally fine. And then a couple other people had hands up to help summarize. Yes, go ahead, Theo.
Just one of the other flashbacks that I remember was the moment that he knew he was in love with Harriet. They're on a bridge in Paris and they've just been fighting. Or they've just gotten into a fight, but he like realizes that he's in love with her. And I think that moment's actually really incredible because it's like the first time he's been alone with her. You know, as a Black man and a white woman in a relationship, obviously not in the 2000s. It's a, you know, not as common and looked down upon for a lot of people. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that's such an important scene, and I'm anxious to look over that scene with you, actually. So I'm glad you brought it up. And also, Theo, you brought up the question of time. When do you all think this is taking place? Did you have any guesses? Anna, what did you think?
I think there's mentions of like North African war with France. I don't know if that's still going on, but and then there's mentions of like I'm not sure. I think probably early 70s would be my guess.
Okay. Yeah, it's so that's an interesting historical context to have in mind. The idea that France was a colonial occupier of certain places in North Africa, and there were wars of, basically nationalist independence movements cropped up, and the people in those places fought back, like Tunisia and so on. And I think the character that is introduced closer to the end of the story, Bouna, the prize fighter, remember him? He seems to be Tunisian, like a Tunisian man who lives in Paris and, by the narrator's description, experiences an enormous amount of discrimination. What else should we add to our summary? There's a flashback to working in the elevator that wait, is it Theo who brought that up? No, Michael brought that up. And then there's the flashback to realizing he's in love with Harriet. And I want to talk about that. Tiago, what else?
Sorry, no, I was going to talk about the boat, but that's after that.
Oh, the boat is good. That's part of a flashback too. Yeah. The boat scene. I definitely want to talk about what happens on the boat. And Greg, what were you going to say?
I was going to say the boat and how he like noticed the Statue of Liberty. Yeah.
Yes. What does he say about the Statue of Liberty? What was striking about that to you, Greg?
I am trying to find the thing right now.
It might be on 162 or 163 or something. I remember it being on the right-hand side of a page. Oh, it's the bottom of 162 to the top of 163, where all the people are on the side of the ship and they're looking at the Statue of Liberty and they're all excited. And yeah. And what is, go
he
ahead.
Was like, he felt like it was an ugly joke for him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that was that was his wife, right?
No, that's the narrator thinking that to himself. You remember, this is a flashback to when he goes back to the United States alone.
Yeah.
And he leaves Harriet behind, and she leaves him. I think she sends him a telegram saying, like, I'm waiting, hurry up and come back. So he's kind of traveling alone. But yeah, that was so interesting how he sees the Statue of Liberty and says it's an ugly joke. Why is it an ugly joke, people? Tiago, why do you think it's an ugly joke?
It doesn't represent liberty for him. Also, sorry, this just popped into my head. This is not completely responding to that passage, but wasn't the Statue of Liberty also a gift from France?
Oh yeah, it was. Oh my gosh, that's such a good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Everything's so complex in this story. Greg, what were you going to say about the ugly joke business?
Exactly that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he's like, the Statue of Liberty represents freedom, liberty, but he's not really free. Anna, what was on your mind?
Well, it also just seems like he associates America and going to America with like unfreedom, whereas leaving America is like escaping.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a really interesting kind of inversion of what the white people on the ship think of. Jamie and then Michelle?
Yeah, adding on to that, I can't remember the page number, but he said like living in America was similar to living in like the white man's world. And like being in France with Harriet was his way of like finding himself and having that escape from that white man's world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we go back to the passage of where he falls in love with Harriet on the bridge, he says that thing you just quoted. And Michelle, what's on your mind?
Well, I was also going to say, like, the section, like, middle 158, I thought it was really interesting when he was describing, like, how in love he is. And, like, it was a really, like, beautiful section. But then there was a line, he says, in the first time in my life, I was free of it. It had not existed for me. Like, it's not like she, oh shoot, it's not there. It's another page, but he's talking about how it's not like bad for Harriet to be like getting married to him.
You are in the right place, but let's just back up a little bit and read more of it. How's that? You're in the right place, Michelle.
Okay.
Let's look at the top of, if you go to the bottom of 157, this is where he says, it was on a bridge, one tremendous, oh, it's April. And in the flashback, it's April too. I was on a bridge one tremendous April morning that I knew I had fallen in love. Harriet and I were walking hand in hand. The bridge was the Pont Royal. Just before us was the great Anna Horloge. Is that how you say that? I don't know.
Horloge.
Okay, I rely on Anna for French. And anybody else who knows French, just tell me because I need you. Anyway, I looked sideways at Harriet's face, and he explains that they're having a tiff. They're having an argument. They're like pissed off at each other, but they're walking around Paris. And now I'm going to skip to the top of 158. I wanted to pull her to me and say, baby, don't be mad at me. And at that moment, something tugged at my heart and made me catch my breath. There were millions of people around us, but I was alone with Harriet. She was alone with me. Never in all my life, until that moment, had I been alone with anyone. The world had always been with us, between us, defeating the quarrel we couldn't achieve and making love impossible. During all the years of my life, until that moment, I had carried the menacing, the hostile, killing world with me everywhere. No matter what I was doing or saying or feeling, one eye had always been on the world, that world which I had learned to distrust almost as soon as I learned my name, that world on which I knew one could never turn one's back, the white man's world. There's that quote, Jamie, that you were talking about. And for the first time in my life, I was free of it. It had not existed for me. I had been quarreling with my girl. It was our quarrel. It was entirely between us. It had nothing to do with anyone else in the world. For the first time in my life, I had not been afraid of the patriotism of the mindless, in uniform or not. Sorry, now I've lost my place. Who would beat me up and treat the woman who was with me as though she were the lowest of untouchables. For the first time in my life, I felt no force jeopardize my right, my power. This is the part that gets like a little weird. To possess and protect a woman. But is that the part you were talking about, Michelle? Yeah. So basically he's kind of, and also this also contained the point that he feels more free in Paris than he would in the United States. But one of the things that he notices being missing from this moment with Harriet is racist ideas, or the fear that racists are going to come along and hassle them because they're an interracial couple. So if this is the late 50s or the second half of the 50s, what is the state of interracial marriage laws in the United States at this time? Is it legal? I remember that there's a Supreme Court case, and of course there's a lot of discrimination against it at this point, but there was a Supreme Court case called Loving versus Virginia that finally rendered it unconstitutional for states to ban interracial marriages. Anybody know when that was? Yes, Theo, what?
Loving v. Virginia looks like 1967 is what I'm seeing.
Isn't that incredibly late? Like, doesn't that feel like, oh, whoa, it took that long? But it is, it's really late, the late 1960s. So for him to be having these feelings of like, here I am, just like, I'm with my girlfriend and nothing matters but us and like our relationship. And even if we're having a fight, there's something beautiful about that, because for once, white supremacy isn't intervening and like invading our heads. I thought that was just such an interesting moment. Yes, Anna.
I don't know if you want to transition, but I was also just going to say there's another flashback on the boat when he's getting off of the boat.
Okay, let's
and
go.
There's like it's on end of 64 and beginning of 65. And there's this like white,
yes,
I don't know what he is, some boat person who's like directing him off. But he said, the narrator says, "This was the face I remembered, the face of my nightmares. Perhaps hatred had caused me to know this face better than I would ever know the face of any lover." And then the guy says, "Come on, boy," he cried, "come on, come on."
Yeah.
And then he says later, "When will I ever get to be a man?"
Yeah.
It's like, that just seems like something that we've been talking about so much, about like dehumanizing, especially male people of color, and just sort of like stripping them of their masculinity. Again, yeah.
Absolutely. It's such a good point. Yeah, that is a really important scene.
I love learning at Kirby because of the individualized attention that I can receive, and because of that one-on-one time that I can have with the teacher all the time and whenever I want it. And yeah, that's my favorite part.
I think I just really like it because it gives you a chance to seriously learn like about the material.